But how do you reconcile that now, right? You're in a circumstance like this. You're being polite. You did say I'm uncomfortable. You did say that I would never do this. And I think that was really important for you to say. But you're not the same person. I mean, how did you?
Yeah.
Even reflecting on it.
Yeah.
It's so disgusting. He offered you his wife.
It is pretty disgusting. And it's also pretty misogynistic because he didn't ask her. He
No.
offered her. I felt sorry for her. So I was very measured with my conversation with them because I felt sorry for her. I could tell she was nervous. She was swinging on the chair back and forth. She didn't want to be there. She felt extremely nervous. And I think that only a coward would berate a very nervous, very scared woman, even if she did something which I personally disagree with, even if I think Adam is personally, he doesn't align with my morals, because she was so nervous and because she was so almost afraid she looked. Mm-hmm. And I think she expected me to go at her hard. So I just felt sorry doing it. I just didn't, I couldn't find, maybe I'm getting soft in my old age, but I think she knows what I think, and I think she knows what the world thinks. And I think if I go at her too hard, it's just going to break her. And I don't really like the idea of her, turning off the camera and bawling her eyes out. I think that God will teach her the lessons she needs to learn from her experience, both positive and negative. And I think that's God's job to do and not necessarily mine. But yeah, it was certainly uncomfortable, and it shows how degenerate the world is becoming. And pornography as a whole is simply just, I think it's an effect. I think it's a tool which is used to ensure that the male populace stays as docile as possible. Mm. I don't think that any of the things that are happening to the male population are accidental. I think that keeping us as docile as possible is very interesting for the people who are in charge of the world, because we're the warrior class. At the end of the day, it's going to boil down to the men who are going to stand up and actually do something about anything at some point in time. So I think they like the idea of us being docile. And I mean, how much more docile can you get than a man sitting there looking at a screen, not even want to reproduce for real because he's just staring at a screen? And I think that's just the next stage in the slave mind.
And it's everywhere now. Whereas, and this is something that my husband says, he doesn't have any social media because he's like, Instagram is pornography. I open my Instagram and I've got Emily Ratajkowski's butt cheeks.
Yeah.
And I'm not a man, so I don't have that same biological reaction to seeing it. But I can only imagine how difficult it is for a man when you open an app and you've got Kim Kardashian offering her body to Emily Ratajkowski. Even if you're walking down the street, I've realized even how desensitized I've become to pornography, because you see an ad for Gucci and for whatever reason, she's got to be completely naked while she's holding the bag.
I remember in my lifetime, there were music videos that got censored or banned or can only be played after 10 or 11 at night. And if you watch them now, you'd be like, what? For what? What is that? A bikini? Like, it's nothing. It's amazing how quickly it has degenerated. And yeah, absolutely.
And we're all degenerating with it. Like I've realized Gucci, and for whatever reason, she's got to be completely naked while she's holding the bag.
I remember in my lifetime, there were music videos that got censored or banned or can only be played after 10 or 11 at night. And if you watch them now, you'd be like, what? For what? What is that? A bikini? Like, it's nothing. It's amazing how quickly it has degenerated. And yeah, absolutely.
And we're all degenerating with it. Like I've realized the fact that I don't have a reaction to seeing the half-naked woman holding a Gucci bag means that I have been desensitized to pornography. And I can only imagine what that does to men.
Oh, completely. And but this is what the powers that be want. They want to make sure that the male populace is as docile as possible. And they do that with a large array of weapons. And they do that with a web of tools. And I believe that I'm the counter to that, which is the reason I ended up attacked in the first place. But unfortunately, when you buy into the slave mind programming, you not become the kind of man who can easily attract a woman, because you're not attractive to females as a whole. So how do you satisfy yourself? You end up sitting there staring at a screen, and they convince you that's a good life to live as a man, and that's perfectly fine and perfectly normal. And you don't even get to genetically reproduce. I do also, though, and I want to make this clear, I do believe in absolute and utter self-accountability as a man. I think as a man, everything that happens to you is your fault. Me going to jail was my fault. Me being attacked online was my fault. If all these bad things that happened to me, I will take responsibility for, even if I believe they were unfair or unjust. And I think that any man who's going to sit there and say, I'm struggling, he also needs to wake up and understand that if you're going to truly struggle to not click on a website, then you're going to deserve the terrible life you're going to live. And the devil or the matrix or whoever you want to call them are going to fill your life with temptations. They're going to fill your life with easy way outs that they're going to want you to take, because the good road is usually the hardest road. And if you're going to continue to fall for them, then you're going to have to suffer the consequences of that. So it's double-edged. It's certainly difficult that pornography is everywhere and men are struggling with it. But to me, what's even more upsetting is that these men don't have enough fortitude and enough mental strength to wake up and say, I'm better than that. Okay. But this is the thing, right? So I'm about to get started, Candace.
Good, get started.
This is the thing. But this is the thing, right? So when you attack a man's mental fortitude on one issue, you attack it on all issues. This is why it's done purposefully. To resist a slave mine, you need to be able to resist in the first place. How can you resist a slave mine if you have no physicality, you have no willpower, no ability to mentally resist anything? Well, then what you're going to end up doing, you're going to end up eating the bugs and watching the porn and sitting in front of your computer. And that's what they want from the people. So I think that it's actually all very interconnected. People come at me with the porn problem and I get the same thing. Guys say to me all the time, hey, what are you going to do? What should I do? I struggle with pornography. And I say, that's because you have nothing else in your life in order. If you were in good physical condition and you had the money you were supposed to have and you had the mentality you were supposed to have, you wouldn't need it. So the reason you're so addicted to porn is because everything else in your life is a failure. And yeah, it's certainly a complicated issue. It's a difficult one. And this is why they fear male agency so much, because when men truly wake up and decide to be the best versions of themselves, they're hard to control because all these control mechanisms fall by the wayside. They don't want the porn anymore. They don't want the antidepressants anymore. They don't want the garbage anymore. And now you have a whole bunch of men who actually want truth and honor and respect, and they want to live for something. And then what are they going to live for? They're going to want to be brave. They're going to want to do the right thing, regardless of how dangerous it may be for their own personal circumstance. And that sounds like a difficult population to enslave. And that's what's scary.
So how do you reconcile, first off, how long ago was your webcam business?
Yeah, so I stopped having any involvement with it. I think 8 to 9 years ago, I stopped. It was a long time ago. It was at the early stages of the internet. And I'll explain it one more time for people. I've explained it already at length, but I'll explain it from the beginning. I had a company. I was fighting at the time. And on a side note, I actually want to make this clear. We talk about things people have done in the past for money. I beat people up for money. I hurt people for money. I don't often tell people this, and I think it's the first interview I've mentioned it in. There's a person who can never walk the same again because he fought me. I've had 87 professional fights, and I did my best to kill people. You're going to sit here and talk about what I did for money. I literally hurt people for money. And so I'm not a perfect person. I'm not sorry for my kickboxing career or my cage fights. I'm not sorry for any of it. I had bare knuckle fights. I'm not sorry for any of them, right? I was a person who had to pay the bills. I lived the life I lived. I used the tools I had. And I ended up opening a webcam company where girls would sit on a laptop and they would talk to guys on the internet for money. That's what they would do. The girls would sit there fully clothed or a bikini. Some of them would paint pictures. Some of them would sing songs. It's very similar to Twitch is now. Twitch is almost more sexual than the sexual websites were back then. I helped the girls set up accounts. We worked together. I helped them become as popular as possible. And everybody made money and everybody was happy. And nobody is complaining about it. Nobody's upset about it. None of the girls who worked for me are upset about it. The government aren't after me for it. It's perfectly legal. Nothing's wrong with it. There's just a whole bunch of people who now think that they can take the moral high ground against me because I previously ran this company. And I think I can anticipate the question you're going to ask. How do I reconcile with the fact that I used to produce pornography or degree pornographic content?
Now men are writing to you like, how do I?
And now men are trying to escape it.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. There's a few different ways I can answer that question. I think the first way I'll answer it is if you own a liquor store and an alcoholic comes in and you refuse to sell him alcohol, does he stop being an alcoholic?
No.
He just goes and buys from someone else. So that's the cop-out answer. The cop-out is, well, these people who are addicted are always going to be addicted regardless of whether I did it or not. So that's the cop-out answer. But the second answer I can give, which I think is more detailed and probably more nuanced, is one, I intimately understand the relationship between men and these websites. I've had and seen men give away their life savings to girls they've never met. I've watched and I've seen it. And I actually think a lot of the insights I give, a lot of the things I tell the world about the mental health crisis, about men being so constantly lonely, about how important it is to build yourself into a high value man, about how money alone is not enough. I explain all these things. A lot of these are lessons from the webcam days. I saw dudes who had a whole bunch of money, no other attributes, and they ended up on these websites spending hundreds of thousands of dollars because they didn't have anything else. So I think I learned a lot of important life lessons, and I do my best to try and pass them on to people. But I guess also, and this is the final answer I want to give about this whole subject, is that I do think I can take the question you're asking and reverse engineer it and use it against the people who are trying to attack me for it. My answer to it would be, how do you sit and want to criticize me for being involved in the production of pornography 10 or 11 years ago if you're involved in the consumption of it? Because you're creating a market for it. So anybody who wants to sit and say that I did things wrong, that's fine. You're allowed to throw stones. But if you're in a glass house, if you have ever signed up to an OnlyFans account, if you have Instagram, if you're following these models on Instagram who you don't know, who are showing their tits and ass all day, if you've watched porn, if you fancy or think some beautiful woman on a movie, if you're going to live in lust yourself and you're funding this entire industry, you're downstream, you're at the bottom of it. How can you then take the moral high ground on the person who's producing it? That doesn't make sense to me. So if you've totally abstained from pornography your entire life and you've never looked at it ever, and you've never been involved with it ever, and you're a perfect person and you want to come along and say what I did was wrong, that's fine. But I don't think most people who are complaining can even say that. I don't think they can. And I will once again state this, and I state this as a matter of almost fact. The level of investigation I've gone under, the level of forensic investigation my life has been submitted to, most people don't understand. Most people have never been through what I've been through. They've not had their entire life forensically analyzed, every word they've ever said, everyone they've ever spoken to, every WhatsApp chat, everything, head to toe by federal agencies for the last 10 years. And the most they come up with is that I ran a webcam company, which I've already admitted to. That's it. Take these people who criticize me and see how many porn websites they've been on. Get their laptops, see the they've Googled, see who they've spoken to. Like, it's all massively hypocritical. I do understand that some people would hear that and go, oh, you know, he's a bad person, etc. I don't think I was a bad person. I never hurt anybody. I think I could have done much worse things. I know many people from my circumstances who did many things worse than what I did. And all in all, I'm not going to sit and pretend I'm sorry for something I'm not sorry for. And I just want to make it clear to the world that, like you said, people come from different backgrounds and people grow and people change, etc. But I also look at the world in a different way. I think that we're all constantly doing our best. I think I'm doing the best I can right now. When I'm 55, I might watch this interview and think I'm an idiot, right? And I think we're all constantly doing our best. And I did the best I could do at the time. And I don't think it makes sense for me to hate past me for doing his best. I just don't think that's a very constructive mindset.